I recently had a conversation that completely shattered my worldview. It was a conversation with my philosophy and ethics professor. At first, I explained to him this novel idea I had about how AI could actually be aligned with humans. I'll talk to you about that in a different episode. But one thing led to another, and I eventually asked him the question, do you think there are such things as universal principles? Principles that apply to everybody and allow them to live a good life. That's something I spend my time looking for and trying to find. And I was pretty sure he didn't think so. He would say, yeah, no, because we're all different and it doesn't work like that. What he said was, for humans, maybe, but you need to think about what if we discovered other life, alien life, NHIs as he calls them, non-human intelligence. He said, imagine in 10,000 years, humans and NHIs, aliens, meet, and the NHIs tell us these principles you have are great, but these ones are better. And it was at that point I remember the exact chain of thought very clearly came back to me. I thought, maybe I do come up with these universal principles. Maybe I do everything I've wanted to do. But in 10,000 years, when humans discover NHIs or someone better comes along or people just get together and think, oh yeah, this and that, my principles might be replaced or improved upon by better principles. They might be replaced by better principles or improved upon and be made into better principles. And that led to the thought that no matter what I do, even working on these universal principles, which I deem to be the most long-lasting thing I could work on, I will still be forgotten. And that was a thought that I had before. I mean, it's obvious that we're all going to be forgotten, but it had never sunk in so viscerally, and I'd never felt it as much as I did that day. When I realized that, his voice trailed off because I just wasn't listening anymore. My gaze went up and to the left, and I saw the pillars and the walls of the school. But for the first time, I felt like I truly saw them. And I just thought to myself how ironic it was that I was worrying about all these things, about immortality and worrying about the fact that I would be someday forgotten, when the mere fact that I even exist for a single second and the fact that I'm able to experience any and all of this for even a single second is worth more than all the gold in the world, and just shows the humor in worrying about these small, menial, insignificant things. It was a sort of existential crisis, but there was none of the despair or the depression or anxiety that came with it. It was more of this extremely calm feeling of knowing there is no meaning, yet not worrying about it. And this conversation led to 3 main realizations that I'd like to share with you today, as well as a few other lessons and things I learned from it, which I will also share with you. The first realization, and I already talked about this, is that we will all be forgotten. In 10,000 years, maybe we discover aliens, maybe there are no aliens, maybe just humans go extinct, or even if humans don't go extinct, someone will come around and find a better way to do no matter what you did. And so eventually, not in 5, 10, 50 years, but in 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 years, you will be forgotten. No one will be remembered. What I don't like is very often when you're told to visualize your death, memento mori, which is a Stoic idea, you're told to visualize you on your deathbed surrounded by your family members. The problem is that's not real death. It's death of your physical being, but it's not real death, which I define by the death of the idea of you, not the physical living organism of you, but rather the idea that you exist. Which obviously, if you're on your deathbed, you will live on for at least a couple more generations until maybe your great-grandkids. That's usually where people start forgetting about their ancestors. So Jesus would be a good example. 2,000 years later, you might be remembered, but I'm gonna bet that maybe as low as a couple hundred years, probably, well, definitely within a few thousand years, even Jesus will be forgotten and replaced by the next best thing. And it wasn't so much that the thought had never entered my mind, although it very rarely did because I tried to avoid it, but it was more of that I've never had such a visceral realization of that fact. The second realization was realizing how little we know about the universe and basically everything. We have physics, we have math, we have biology, chemistry, all of these different fields, but in reality, we know so little. We have the observable universe, which is the part we can see, but we don't know where that is. And a lot of physicists, a lot of people will tell you, oh, but that's a stupid question because it's unfalsifiable or whatever, so why would you ask such a stupid question? I don't think it's a stupid question. I think it's the people who say it's a stupid question, say a physicist, are people who don't want to confront the fact that they won't be able to answer that question. So they say, oh, in physics, we don't deal with the why questions. We only deal with what and how. I don't know if that's a shame because we have philosophy for those questions, which is great. But it is a shame that a lot of physicists, professors and all the rest just disregard those questions as if the mere question is an insult to everything physics stands for. Because no matter how much we discover in physics or math or all these fields, they will never be able to answer the large questions, the most difficult questions that we have so far, which is, why are we here? Why is there something instead of nothing? Where are we? Does God exist? Where is the universe? One thing I thought of is that maybe the universe is within the universe. So you could imagine we each have a universe inside of our minds, and then there is us inside of that universe with a universe inside of it. And so you just go infinitely both ways, which makes a bit more sense than just nothingness. But we don't know. That's really the answer. And during my conversation with my professor, the analogy I gave him was that of a hamster in a wheel. If you've ever had hamsters, you usually put a little wheel in their cage so that they can run because they enjoy it. But imagine you are a hamster and your entire life you've just been running on this wheel. Usually hamsters eat and stuff, but imagine you've just been running your entire life on the wheel nonstop, and then suddenly you fall off the wheel for the first time. And that's the first time you're able to see that you have been running in a circle. You haven't been going anywhere. You can see the entire, what you thought used to be the entire world. It's a bit like Plato's cave. Imagine you are the hamster, you fall out of the wheel and you realize, my entire life has just been this wheel. What I thought was reality was in fact just one dimension of it. And so then you look around naturally and you see, oh, you're in a cage. And then you wonder, well, where is that cage? What room is it in? What house? What city? What country? What universe is it in? And you don't know. And when I said that, my professor replied with, well, maybe you'll be able to discover what room, maybe what house, but you'll never be able to find the house next door. And as someone who believes in high agency, doesn't like putting arbitrary limits on human potential, I didn't like that answer. But what I didn't understand at the time was that it wasn't so much about literally getting to the next house, because we haven't assigned what a house means in this analogy, but rather it's the idea that you will never know everything. There will always be something outside. There will always be more things you can learn. You will always be imperfect. You will never know everything, but you must dance with the imperfection. You must simply learn to live with it and enjoy it. More than just living with it, you must learn to embrace it. And something else I thought about was there's this species of deer that have these reins or horns. I don't know what they're called. The things that grow on their heads. I'll call them horns. Over time, through natural selection and evolution, the deer with the biggest horns were selected for because it helps with mating, it helps with fighting, it helps with scaring off potential predators, all of these benefits. And so naturally the ones with the biggest horns would get selected for, until eventually the horns were too big. They were too heavy, they couldn't move around as quickly, they would get stuck in the trees and the bushes. It would just be heavy for their necks to carry, they couldn't see properly, they would get caught or seen more easily. And so what used to be an advantage became a detriment to its survival, and then they went extinct. And a lot of people could argue that our consciousness is much like the horns were for those deer, where at first, yes, they were an advantage and we developed more and more consciousness, our brain developed more and more, but it's gotten to the point where our horns are too heavy for us and they've become a burden. You could say that asking these grand philosophical questions is just a waste of time, and it is a way of showing that our horns have grown too big for our heads to support and they're just detrimental. But I don't agree with that. I think these questions are important, and as long as you approach them from the right point of view and you don't let despair engulf you from asking these questions, it's better to live with the truth, even if it might hurt, than live in blissful ignorance. There really is no such thing as blissful ignorance in reality. And talking about blissful ignorance is the third realization, which is that there is no meaning, but don't despair. There's this quote, I forgot who said it exactly, but it goes something like, there is no meaning, but why does that matter anyway? It's a little play on words, a pun. But I think there's a lot of truth to it. And the fact that the person, I think it was Sartre or one of the philosophers said it, the fact that he said it kind of as a joke, I think is extremely important in our approach towards the realization that there is no meaning. When you realize there is no absolute universal meaning, it's a bit like walking a tightrope. The problem is, if you fall off on one side of the tightrope, you have nihilism, where you despair and you just think, oh, well, there is no meaning, so why do anything anyway? You just destroy your life, basically. Or if you fall on the other side, it's not much better. Some people call it philosophical suicide, which is where you find the closest thing you can grasp, so maybe religion, maybe some philosophy, and you just grasp onto it for dear life to not feel the meaning slip through your fingers, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you find the closest philosophy that even resembles truth, and you just believe it to be true and never question it, because questioning it would expose that there is no universal meaning and you don't know what to do with that realization. In reality, if you're able to walk the tightrope without falling into nihilism or philosophical death, you get to a very, very beautiful place where I used to think, well, if there is no meaning, a lot of people say, oh, find your own meaning. That's stupid, because if you have a rotten cake, you put icing on it, it's still rotten. But I was looking at it the wrong way. That's basically falling into nihilism. The equivalent of walking on the tightrope and getting to the other side, wherever that is, or at least not falling, is thinking of life as, imagine you are in front of a table with a bunch of ingredients on it, and you have other people around the table, some with more ingredients, some with less ingredients, and you're all there. You don't know what kitchen you're in, you don't know where you are, you don't really know who the other people are at the moment, you don't know who you are, and you don't know why you're here, but you are in this room. Doesn't seem, there is an exit, but given you're there at the table with all these ingredients and all these marvelous things you could cook up, why would you just waste it? Because you know you only have a limited time. You have a little timer that takes every second and tells you you're getting ever closer to eventually not being able to play with the ingredients anymore. But given you're there, you might as well do something with it. Now, going back to what we talked about in previous episodes, some people will want to build the biggest and grandest and most beautiful thing in the world, maybe the biggest cake. And that's what they want to do, and they can't live any other way. But some people don't really want to do that because it requires a lot of effort, sleepless nights, a lot of worrying, a lot of obsessing over the right ingredients and all the right colors, and they're just happy with making a nice pie. It shows you how in life you don't know why you're here, you don't know where you are or what you're doing exactly, but you have a bunch of stuff in front of you, and you can build stuff with it, you can share it with others, you can enjoy your time with others as well. And so the question then becomes, well, what do I want to build? Of course, you could stab yourself, kill yourself in some way to stop the existence in front of the table, but that's really a shame because you probably will never be here again. And given you're able to experience this even for a second, means you might as well try and build whatever you can, try and cook whatever you can, use the oven, try all the different ingredients, talk with the people around you, bake something and give it to them, to feed them and their families. What you can do is basically unlimited. You have unlimited possibility for the things you could do. So do something. Don't just sit around watching what other people are doing or despairing at the fact you don't know why you're at this table with all these beautiful, fresh ingredients in front of you. Just build and see where it leads you. Maybe once you build the biggest cake ever, you realize that's just as good as the smallest cake ever because it's about the detail or the colors and not about this or that. And you learn through your process of cooking and making and creating and sharing with others. And that's kind of all you can do. And so the right response is to admire and relish in the fact that you do exist. And whenever you worry too much about why you exist or what we're even doing here and what the meaning of all of this is, you just relax and you can laugh at the absurdity of it all, at the fact that you even exist and are consciously able to worry about your own existence is often quite funny. And that's why I really like the quote, yes, the world has no meaning, but why does that matter anyway? Because in the quote itself, it gives you the way you're meant to address these sorts of questions, which is through laughter and not taking it too seriously. Because it's the people who take it seriously that either fall into nihilism or philosophical death. And a quote that comes to mind before moving on is a quote from Bukowski, which goes, "We are all going to die, all of us. What a circus. That alone should make us love each other, but it doesn't. We are terrorized and flattered by trivialities. We are eaten up by nothing." And I think it really explores the idea of how, despite knowing there is no meaning and realizing the absurdity of existence and of everything and the beauty of it especially, even despite that, we often fall back into our habits of worrying about the most minute things, which is often because our biology tells us to, which doesn't mean you have to. And before I forget, there's also a movie I'd recommend, which is American Beauty. American Beauty is a marvelous movie for various reasons, not because there's some kind of pedophilic thing, obviously not. And, you know, it really annoys me when I recommend the movie and the people just come back to me and they say, "Oh, why did you recommend me this movie? It's like about this dude who likes his daughter's friend." And when I say that, you might not be interested. But I really hope, if you're listening to this, you're not like these people who, man, it's just disappointing. It's like a kid, like a very young child, an immature child or a teenager, a young teenager. You show them the French liberation painting. I don't know what it's called. The lady with the French flag, French liberation revolution painting. And you show that. It's a beautiful piece of art. If you've ever gone to Paris and seen it, it's beautiful. The paint is like immaculately put on there. You show that to mature adults, they'll say, "Wow, that's beautiful. The themes, the colors, the ideas behind it." You show it to an immature teenager, he's going to point at the boob. He's going to say, "Oh, look at that boob." Anyways, American Beauty, excellent movie for multiple reasons, but the two core ideas I really like is one, the idea of light versus darkness, balancing those two energies, which is going to be a whole other episode. But more importantly, it's the main philosophy, which is that the world is extremely beautiful. And I don't just mean what most people consider to be beautiful. I mean everything. I mean the fireplace behind me, obviously, but I also mean the intricate designs on the sweater I'm wearing. I also mean the little red recording thing on the camera, the green bars moving up and down for the audio. Everything is beautiful. Mere existence is beautiful. Pain, as well as beauty and love, are beautiful. And that's the main philosophy. There's the quote from the movie, which is, "Sometimes I see all the beauty in the world, and it feels like my heart is going to explode, but then I remember to let go."
I guess I could be pretty pissed off about what happened to me, but it's hard to stay mad when there's so much beauty in the world. Sometimes I feel like I'm seeing it all at once, and it's too much. My heart fills up like a balloon that's about to burst. And then I remember to relax and stop trying to hold on to it.
And I think it's really a beautiful idea. And when you realize, oh, maybe there is no meaning, you are really freed to enjoy the beauty in the world. So now we move on to a few other things I'd like to talk to you about, which is the first thing I'd like to share is what I call the peak experience, which is what I experienced basically right after having the visceral realization. Visceral is important. You can understand all of this on a logical level, but it's not until you feel it that you truly grasp the concept. And I really wish this eventually happens to you because it's extremely beautiful. So the first part of it, that is that it was accompanied with an immense sense of calm as well as freedom. I just had never felt so free. It was beautiful. And I think it came from this sense of not caring, because when you realize there is no meaning in the universe and that we will all be forgotten, realizations 1 and 3, you think to yourself, well, why worry about embarrassing myself when within 500 years, which is such a short time frame on the universal timescale, literally no one will ever remember that. And it's much less than 500 years, but even 500 years, basically everything you do will be forgotten within 500 years. So why not go talk to the girl, start the business, do whatever you want to do? And as a sort of embodiment, I could say, of this sense of freedom and calm was what most people would consider strange behaviors, but I just did them because I could. It was the equivalent of playing around with the ingredients for the first time when you realize these are ingredients and not really important, masterful tasks. So for example, I would walk side to side for no reason, but just because I could. I would walk in the middle of the road, even if cars were coming, and just waving them aside. So basically, if I was walking up the road and a car comes up behind me, I turn around, I see it, I put my hand up next to my head, move over to the side as if saying, just wait 1 second. They pass by and they actually waved at me. People usually kind of nod their head, they lift their hands a bit, but this time every single car with no exception, and I can't tell you why this happened, just waved at me. Even though I was literally walking in the middle of the road, which isn't what you're supposed to do. Now, does that mean you should walk in the middle of the road? No. Well, yes, you can, but don't do anything stupid. The road I walk on has like one car every minute maybe, and it's not even it's a little street basically. Don't go on the highway and start walking in the middle. And another thing is I saw a guy who used to, like a child entertainer, I don't know what the word is, basically during summer, if your parents are still working, they drop you off at these places where you do activities during the day and then they pick you up in the evening. And this guy who used to take care of the kids back when I was there, I usually try to avoid him because I always think, well, we know each other, but we don't, and it's going to be awkward, and I just can't be bothered with it, so I would purposely try and avoid him. This time, I just see him, and I was feeling this overwhelming sense of love and compassion for the world through realizations 1, 2, 3. Actually, let's add a fourth one. The fourth realization, I already talked about this, is the immense beauty in the world and feeling immense love and compassion for it. I saw him and I just walked straight up to him. In France, you sometimes do handshakes, sometimes you do a little kiss on the cheek. I just went in for a kind of hug, which is a bit weird and it was a bit awkward because he wasn't expecting it and all of this stuff. And if I was in my regular state of mind, I would start overthinking and everything. But no, I just went in for it, and then we talked for a few minutes, went our own ways, and it was a fine conversation. And I think that came from not caring, an immense sense of calm as well as freedom, because I thought, yeah, it might be awkward, but honestly it's kind of funny. It's laughing at the absurdity that we would be so worried by these trivialities of a slightly awkward handshake or a slightly awkward hug and all of these things. I just found it quite funny, and I was happy to be able to connect with a fellow human. Everything felt like a game and felt playful. I didn't really take anything too seriously, including myself. And it was really the state, a bit like a kid, where whatever I wanted to do or say, I just did or said. The only difference is a kid doesn't know what is good or bad, whereas as you grow older, you tend to know what is good for you and the world and what is bad for you in the world. I think that's a very good rule, which is just doing what you want. And you might think, wow, that's a very dangerous idea, because what if you just want to kill and rape people and smoke crack and do drugs and ruin your life? But I would ask you, do you really want to do those things? Now, for some people, that is the case. They want to do drugs, they want to eat bad food, they want to ruin their lives, in which case you need to first develop yourself to the point where you don't want to do those things anymore. But for a lot of people who are on self-improvement, self-development, or who have built themselves up to a good, healthy lifestyle, just doing what you want is honestly not the worst way to go, because it really relaxes you and stops you from thinking about all these things you should do, like a ping pong bouncing around in your head. and you just do what you want. And at least in my case, for example, being on self-improvement for a few years now, I don't want to do anything that's unhealthy for me or inhibits me from getting to my goals. I don't want to smoke crack. I don't want to commit crime. Not that I really ever wanted to, but don't want to commit crime, don't want to do drugs, eat bad food, waste my time, scroll TikTok. I don't want to do these things. And so if I just do what I want, it actually leads to a better life because I'm more honest and true to my core desires. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to keep all of this, but there are a few things that I've been able to keep with me since that realization a few weeks ago. I still don't take anything too seriously. That doesn't mean I don't try. That doesn't mean I don't still go to the gym and work on myself and work towards my goals. It just means that I'm not worried about anything. If I have exams, I had some pretty big exams recently, I revise for them. I make sure I'm at my best. I get enough sleep. I exercise. I clear my mind. I make sure I'm on point and able to focus. But I just don't take it too seriously because I think, well, at the end of the day, not only are these exams kind of corrupt as in the school system and all the rest, which is a whole separate topic, but also I just zoom out and look at the universe as a whole and again go through the 3 or 4 realizations now and just think, well, it's funny I would even worry about this given we don't even know why we're here. It's very helpful because stress has no place in your life. From Grapes of Wrath, Jo Ma, one of the things she says is that worrying is like living multiple lives. If you worry about the future, it's like you're living multiple separate realities. If you worry about the past, it's called depression. It's also like you're living multiple different realities, one where this happened, one where that happened. Oh, but what if I had done that and this? And you're just living all these lives, which is extremely tiring, and you don't get anything out of it. And if you just do what you want, you probably don't want to worry, so just don't worry. Easier said than done, but the realizations help. Secondly, I don't get offended. I never have, well, for a few years now, I very rarely get offended, but now it's even less, again, thanks to the realizations. I basically don't worry at all. I'm just happy to be alive most of the time. If anybody asks me, oh, but how did the test go? How did this go? Aren't you worried? Aren't you angry? Aren't you this? I'm just happy to be alive. And another thing is, during the peak experience state, was this, again, immense sense of love and compassion. Even if somebody hated me, I wouldn't let myself be walked all over. I would distance myself, not interact with that person, but I would still send them love and compassion from a place of realizing they're just as lost as anybody else is, and this is the best way they find to do something. If somebody curses at you or insults you or makes fun of you, that's not nice. Don't associate with them. But at the same time, don't get angry at them. They're just trying their best, right? You treat everybody with love and compassion. And of course, the people who treat you with love and compassion, you respond likewise. And so the main challenge has been returning to that really visceral state of feeling the realizations, not just knowing them. Because that's what allows you to embody those values of freedom, calm, and just not caring, finding everything is a funny game that you're able to play and enjoy whilst you can. But yeah, the challenge has really been trying to get back to it. But what I've realized is the goal shouldn't be to be that way 24/7 because it is exhausting, it can be scary and destructive, but rather be able to toggle it on and off, and at least toggle it on a few times a day to just remind yourself of these core truths about the universe we inhabit. And the way I describe this is, imagine you're in the Matrix, and then slowly the objects around you start turning into the lines of code. If you've seen the movie, there's a scene, or maybe a few, where Neo sees the code in the Matrix instead of objects. You experience that for a bit, but then slowly the objects start fading back in. And now when you look around, know that these aren't necessarily real, but you don't know how to not see them again and only see the numbers. Now, I'm not saying that reality isn't real, although that is in question, but it's more of a way to describe it where you've experienced it and you know that you've experienced it. You can remember it cognitively, but you can't experience it the same way as you did back then, in such a visceral way. In terms of benefits, I've created a list here of quite a few of them. First one is freedom and courage from freedom comes courage. When nothing has cosmic meaning, there's nothing to protect, no identity to defend, and so you can just do things. Again, walking side to side, walking in the middle of the road, painting if I wanted to, listening to the music I wanted to, talking to the people I wanted to, just zero inhibition. And people would have described me at the time, and hopefully now, as immensely courageous or confident for doing the things I did. A good example would be in American Beauty. There's the scene where Ricky walks up to Lester's daughter and her friend, and he just talks with them. They aren't very receptive because he was kind of creepy, and he just walks away, and one of the girl comments, "Oh, like I can't believe he has such immense confidence." That's what I imagine I was like.
My name's Ricky. I just moved next door to you.
I know. I kind of remember this really creepy incident where you were filming me last night.
I didn't mean to scare you. I just think you're interesting.
Thanks. I really don't need to have some psycho obsessing about me right now.
I'm not obsessing. Just curious.
What a freak. And why does he dress like a Bible salesman? He's like so confident. I can't be real.
The second benefit is charisma. When you don't seek validation, you become magnetic. That's the basis of social skills, being non-needy, non-attached to outcomes, as well as being present and calm. And people are just generally drawn to that energy. More benefits are you're honest with yourself and your life. You basically can't lie to yourself anymore, because when you realization 3, which is that there is no universal meaning, there's also no meaning in hiding or being afraid or living a life you don't want to live, building a cake when in reality you want to cook a steak. There's no point in doing that, because maybe you'll never be able to do it again, so you might as well just cook a steak if that's what you want to do. Immense love and compassion, it's just festering in resentment and hate and all these negative emotions. It's just not the way to live. And living with this overflowing sense of love and compassion for the world, for the people, even those who don't treat you fairly, is a much better way to live. It makes you happier. It just puts a smile on your face constantly. And when you realize everybody is just like you, which is a consciousness grasping for meaning in our world, it's really hard to be angry or upset at someone who does something stupid. Again, that doesn't justify bad behavior. It just means you can understand it and not let that damage you more than it does. You have two things that cause pain. The first one is the actual arrow that hits you, and the second one is the story you tell yourself about why the arrow hit you. And so loving compassion, yes, the words might hurt, but you don't start thinking about, oh, this and that. You just treat them with loving compassion, forgive them, and then move on. And a final benefit is that it really encourages you to build something, because there is nothing else to do. You don't know why you're here or where you are, but you are here, so you might as well build something. Build something for yourself and build more for others. And now a few final notes is that God does exist. It seems extremely unrelated. I didn't really know how to weave it into the tapestry of the episode. Yes, God exists. We call it different names. Some people call it the universe, karma, God, our creator, all of these names, but in reality they point back to the same core idea. All the religions talk about the same thing. Enlightenment is something I used to think is relentless self-improvement. I've realized enlightenment is this realization. This is the core fundamental truth of the universe, and that should be extremely exciting to you. The fact that you've learned this, I think, is amazing. And more importantly, enlightenment is realizing that on a visceral level, for one, so maybe you haven't quite had that yet, but it's also not falling into nihilism or philosophical death, as I mentioned earlier. It's more of realizing it, but dancing with the imperfection, accepting the truth, and enjoying the beauty of the universe and seeing what you can build, doing it from a place of love as opposed to a place of despair and hopelessness. So it's not relentless self-improvement. It's not eliminating all desire, but it's seeing the absurdity clearly, acting freely anyway, and dancing with the imperfection, building something because you can, for no other reason than because you can and you want to. You live and dance with the imperfection. Enlightenment is realizing that the fact you even get to experience anything, and I mean anything, any sort of experience, music, sight, sound, smell, touch, for a single second is the most beautiful thing in the world. Given you experience many, many seconds, some experiences are better than others, but at the end of the day, the fact that you're able to experience anything, I mean the heat of your body, the pressure against your chair, the breath you're able to take, the words you're hearing into your ears right now, is extremely beautiful and is worth more than all the gold and diamonds and everything in the universe. And how do you reach the state of enlightenment? One thing is meditation, which isn't going to get you to it, but it's a prerequisite. I've been meditating for half a decade, basically, every single day, and I'm completely certain that that in some way, shape, or form has contributed to that realization I had those few weeks ago on Friday whilst talking with my professor. It's not enough, but it is necessary. The second one is memento mori, something you do regularly, just remember your death, but I don't mean you on your deathbed, I mean being forgotten. Step back periodically, appreciate the fact that you even exist, laughing at the absurdity, acting on your desires without attachment to outcome, and love as a default response. The last two especially, you'll realize that you don't necessarily need the realization to begin acting the way you would if you had the realization. And sometimes acting that way will lead to you getting the realization. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but both and either can come before the other. So it doesn't really matter where you start. But I will say, don't bank on it. Don't spend your entire days just trying to get to the realization. One day it will strike you. You will feel it extremely viscerally, and that will be a beautiful day for you. It might be the most beautiful day of your life. But these are a few ways that would definitely help, or at least the knowledge and practice of them would help you achieve enlightenment. In closing, this is the most important realization I've had. I've had two such important days in my life. Friday 2 weeks ago was one of them, and there's another one, but that's for another day. I'm still integrating it, and the mission makes much more sense now. It's not about giving people rules to follow, it's about helping them see what's actually going on. And then they can dance with it too. We can have a cosmic dance party full of love, celebration, and music.